All right, greetings everybody. Steely Boo here. Wanted to do kind of the same thing I did with Puppeteer in my last video for Necromancer and show you um, what I think is the best build on Necromancer and kind of give you my thoughts behind the whole process. So here you go. This is what the final product will look like. But I'll do like I did in the last one. Go ahead and reset the skill points, walk you through the progression in each of the columns, kind of give you an idea of why I choose what I chose and why I didn't choose some of the other perks. Now, in the first column, I think probably the first ability you want to start off with is going to be Infernal Revenue. So this increases your how much points you get for each orb that you pick up from 25 with the additional 10% here gives you up to 28 for each orb collection. So not the most amazing ability in the game, but I do think that it has a little bit of an effect on making it a little bit quicker to pick up orbs at the beginning. When you go from 0 to 250, instead of collecting 10 orbs at the start of a match, this allows you to collect 250 with 9 orbs. So a small bonus. I do quite like this one on Necromancer in particular. Now, of the starting uh, skill points, the next two I'd recommend would be both the Health Raisers. So Health Raiser Basic, Health Raiser Elites. Um, I find that Necro is kind of unique in that his Health Raisers are very early on his build. Now, if you remember on Warlord and Puppy, they both have their Health Raisers. I think around the fourth column. And so he's got a little bit of an advantage in that it's cheaper in a way to, at least for the early players of Necro, to go into Health Razor as compared to them two. So highly recommend those. Then I would go ahead and just to get to the 6 points, go for the Rock Steady on the basics and elites. 15% is quite a lot. 35% is a lot. Very, very good for your starting units. Now, I still um, would recommend you go ahead and get the Rocksteady level 1, but I would not recommend that you go to level 2, level 3 on the Rocksteady for boss. Just like I was explaining in my puppy video for Necro and Warlord. Um, I don't like balance bar increases for the boss because when you get to the 5th threat level skill point in the match on boss, when you get to level 20, you should definitely prioritize boss for that threat level point that you get. And what it does is it lowers the cooldown on your boss, makes them come back quicker, I think 20% quicker, and then on top of that also eliminates your balance bar. You can no longer be stunned, and this perk here no longer does anything. So having extra balance bar is helpful for that level 1, level 2 boss that you push out early in the game, but by the end of it you really won't be, this is a dead perk. It doesn't do anything anymore. Now, when you go to the second skill level, the first perk I would recommend highly, actually, is Scarier Demonic Dash. This is, as far as I can tell, the only way to fear survivors is for Necro is through the Demonic Dash, and he's unique. Excuse me. He's unique in that he's the only one that if you go 3 points into Demonic Dash, it goes all the way up to 75. Now, for a survivor with no fear resistance, no points put into fear in game, um, when you hit them with this, it gets them from 0 to 75, and 75 is all it takes in order to possess a survivor. Possessing a survivor is great for any demon at all, because when you possess them you get 300 experience in the game, and it allows you to build your threat level very quickly. Now, looking throughout Necro's build, I don't think there is really any other way to manufacture fear in survivors. Now, they do have this perk Skelephobia, which increases the fear percentage if a survivor is near skeletons, but they're not like Puppy and where they have the scared death ability, where every time you or the AI hits a survivor, they get feared by 2 points each time. In addition to the demonic dash, I just don't this one, Necro doesn't have that kind of ability. If you hit a survivor, they don't get any additional fear. And so I think the fear per second here, the way that this increases survivor fear is either through the demonic dash going through them. Um, if they're near a skeleton, usually when a survivor is kind of tied up, maybe they're doing balance bar damage, an F attack, or an F finisher, you can kind of lock them in animation. It makes demonic dash very easy to hit them with. So if they're near a skeleton, maybe it makes the demonic dash more do more damage. Or if a survivor is by themselves, there's a natural fear increasing mechanic in the game where solo they just kind of slowly build up their own fear. And so if they're near a skeleton by themselves, they probably get feared a little bit quicker through this perk. But otherwise, demonic dash, highly recommend this perk. Now of the 4 perks I end up choosing, the next one I would go into is Portal Authority Elite. Now, something I want to talk about in regards to Necromancer as opposed to Warlord and Puppy is that Warlord and Puppy, they both have costlier basics and elites just off the cuff, like immediately. So their basics, their elites cost 150 to portal in basics, 175 to portal in elites. Now Necromancer is cheaper. They are, without any perks put into them whatsoever, only costing 125 for basics, 150 for elites. That's 25 points infernal energy cheaper than their counterparts, and which is just like a huge leg up. So when you go just going 10% into Portal Authority on elites here, that kicks it down even further. So that 150 becomes 135, and that just by itself is a huge decrease. And if you go into, let's see, uh, if you have, if you go all the way into portals, you'll end up making it, I think, another additional 20% cheaper. And so that gets it down to 105 for an elite with just this perk. So you can bring in maxed out threat level. You can bring in very quickly three um, portals, no problem, when you have Portal Authority mixed into the array. So the next perk I would go into is Louder War Cry. Now, this one's quite good in that this ability is just naturally great on skeletons. It allows you to kind of end a combo by pressing 2. So you can swing 4 times, press 2, and it hits down this, he kind of like slams the butt of his spear into the ground and does quite a lot of damage. So highly recommended Louder War Cry. Definitely one on your builds. Now, in order to move down the line later on, you're going to want to go ahead and get Energizing Demonic Dash. Now, this Demonic Dash by itself gives you 100 Infernal Energy for every survivor you dash through with the ability. Now, in addition to the fear, so this makes it go from 100 to 110. If you were to go another couple points, it would give you 5 more energy for each one, 10 more energy for the last tick. I would not recommend it. It's definitely a perk that's unique to Necromancer, but um, I really would only suggest this in order to get to abilities later on. So with that, that allows you to get to the third column. Now, I want to talk about elites a little bit as well. The reason I would not recommend these, the Trident Smash and the damage skill points, is that I find that elites are only good in defending objectives near the end of the game. They're actually really good at defending objectives near the end of the game, and so you won't be able to, in other than those scenarios, which are important. In those scenarios, they're just not very effective, especially if you're dealing with a hunter or a leader. Basically, any survivor that's running away from you when you're playing the elites, you won't be able to really catch them and combo out and start doing damage. they they just don't, they're not effective in that situation. So although I'm a huge fan of the Seismic Smash, Trident Smash abilities, I just don't see them as consistent enough throughout the game. The basics can actually run down the survivors. The boss at least has the grab in addition to be able to run down the survivors. And so I just think that because of those weaknesses, these abilities are not used throughout the match. You're better off starting with basic units until you get into those objective situations. So that's why I'm dodging these abilities here, and why I'll be dodging Trident Missile as well. All right, so going into the third column, the first perk I would recommend is Portal Authority. Same reason as this one here. That 10% lowers the cost of that 125, and it gets progressively cheaper. This is actually not a bad perk at all to go heavy into 3. Um, Now, Warlord also has Portal Authority, but the Warlord's Portal Authority stops at the second level. They had the same 10% and then 5%. But Necro, in addition to already having naturally cheaper units, has this third tick, and who would have thought another 10% reduced Infernal Energy. Quite like it. I'm not going to recommend it for the best build because Necro is so naturally cheap. I don't think he really needs it, although I'm quite happy to have these 10%. So great perks. I just wouldn't go heavy into either one. For the next perk, I would go Bone Rage here. This makes your skeletons attack more often. This is for your AI units. It allows them to just kind of swing a little bit more often. Pretty self-explanatory. I like this ability. For the next one, both of these are objective perks. Test the Time and Infernal Refill. I would probably go Test of Time first, although I'm not too happy with Necro's Test of Time. In a way, this is just trying to get down the line. It does provide a benefit, but it doesn't even, with the 1 point, offset what leaders can do. with their perks, they can speed up the objective up to 15%. This barely offsets that, and then I think the supports also have an ability, or another Survivor unit also has an ability to reduce the timer objectives, and so Necro has the worst one. Warlord for their first tick at least has the 15% you get from 2 ticks here, and then goes up to 20. And then Puppeteers is quite strong. It's 20% for the first one, another 15 up to 35% for the second tick. It's just here, it's just not as good. If it was 20, 35, I'd probably be going all in on Test of Time. But for here, I just recommend the 1 tick. Now, excuse me, Infernal Refill is actually a pretty useful ability. So when you're at the objectives, it makes your energy refill at a quicker pace. I think it's something like 20 energy per second, so this increases that to 21. And then if you go to second tick, 10% gets it up to 22. And so it just allows that quickly refilling bar to refill at an even quicker pace. Now, in order to get down the line, you need 1 more tick. Let's go ahead and go into Health Razor Basic. We definitely like to have the basic units be as strong as possible for that early game rush. And so I would focus your basics first with your additional points. I don't love Portal Authority enough to go heavy into that with the skill points in the third column, and Test of Time, that 5% just does not feel worth it to me. So we're going to go back to the first row and increase health. Now in the fourth column, looks like we need 1 more perk, so we're going to go all the way with basics, and that unlocks our fourth. Now, this is where things start to get really interesting. Irreparable damage. This makes it where when Evil Ash hits a survivor, it just they can't heal. So if you are focusing a support, for instance, they can't just start drinking a shemps in your face if you're just swinging on them. Of course, you're interrupting their ability to do that, but this gives them a further moment of not being able to heal. Or if you're focusing a warrior and a Cheryl is drinking a shemps to the side, they don't receive the healing effect from their allies. Or if she puts that kind of like that aura down on the ground, her Q ability, they won't receive any of the bonuses from that, including if you're swinging on a Cheryl and she manages to pull that off. It just doesn't. It just kind of like puts survivors in a bad situation. So big fan of this perk. Highly recommend this one. Of the 4 perks left, because we kind of focus on these rows. Of those, I'm a huge fan of all 3 of these. Really, all 4. This is one of the strongest rows on Necromancer's page, in addition to the first row, I'd say. Come Back Stronger. What this does is when you use your 2 ability on Necromancer, he kind of raises his hand and puts up a small aura around him, and every basic unit, elite unit around you that aura touches kind of pings them, and if they get killed, they're instantly brought back to life, and just within like half a second they're right back up. You kind of see this like glowing animation, and they re-rise from the ground. And not only do they come back, but they come back even stronger. So this gives them additional health, additional damage, and I believe that's in addition to any bonuses they already have. So this is a very strong ability. I quite like the first tick of it with that 20%. The second 2 ticks, although I do recommend them, only give 10% each one. Looking at Widespread Skeleton Resurrection, this one is very, very good, especially this very first skill point. This resurrection ability that I was just discussing with Come Back Stronger naturally only has a 15-second duration. So this first tick increased from 15 seconds to 25. Now, I'm a big fan of using this ability because using these skill points on this, because he has such a ridiculously long cooldown on both of his abilities. His one ability brings in 2 up to 3 extra skeletons every time you use it. But the thing is, it takes 70 seconds in order to get the cooldown back. So when you use his summoning ability 70 seconds, a full minute later, you can use it again. But it's just often you will find that your bosses don't last that long. Either they're put in a situation where they can't chase down a survivor effectively without just losing all your infernal energy. Maybe you need to leave to a new area, or your boss is just being pounded on by 4 survivors in an objective. They just don't last long enough. So in most situations, you'll be using your abilities 1, 2 back to back right at the start, and then you probably won't get a chance to reuse them. Now, the resurrection also has a 70-second cooldown, so it's good to know that after you use and after you go all the way through the duration, so if it's 15 seconds, after that 15 seconds, the 70-second timer starts up. If the duration's 25 or 30, as I would recommend, the 70-second timer doesn't start until that duration is over. So this doesn't give you a leg up in that situation, but it's such a strong ability that I highly recommend it, especially in pairing with Come Back Stronger. Very, very useful. So definitely recommend both of these abilities, at least 1 tick into each. Health Raiser Boss, huge fan of this on Warlord and on Necro. They have similar health gains. So him, he gets 10%, 10%, and then 35. Big fan of this one. So not a fan of balance bar, but bosses, you want them to have as much survivability as possible. So 35 stacks with the points that you put into him from the threat level on boss and the points you put into possession. They both all add up. So them 2 combined, it's 50% health from possession. 35 is 85%, and then I think you get another 25% for boss. It might be 20, but either way, it's over 100%. You're doubling the health of your boss with those threat level points and this health raiser. So highly recommend. I would go this one first as far as focusing any one perk and getting you to the next level. Skeletal Reinforcements, huge fan of this one. This is the one that increases the amount of skeletons that you summon from 2 to 3. So very useful. Skeletons are, if not just the AI attacking more frequently and having the extra health and damage, they're very useful in that they apply their perk, the perk ability, skeletal injury. So I think that at the very least, if you go into a one-on-one situation where you're just pulling out the boss on an enemy, definitely want to put the skeletons out there just to get this skeletal injury going. If there's not already skeletons around you, either way, you probably want to have more. And and this is the reason why it's so important, is that it increases the damage received by survivors. This basically means, regardless of Evil Ash or not, skeletal injury means that all units do 10% more damage. And we'll talk about damage increases later, but this one alone is 10%. Very, very powerful, and this helps you out. Having that additional skeleton keeps them around just a little bit more and allows you to kind of wail on survivors. Now, looking on Healthy Bones, I wasn't a fan of this perk at all. When you put down the Flautist, he he doesn't move. He's very directional with the audio, so often you'll see when you put down the Flautist that survivors will run immediately to that area. The moment they discover him, no matter how much health he has, whether it's 200 or 225, this additional amount of health just doesn't, it's not really clutch in any way. Once they start shooting at him, he can't do anything. There's no dodging. That additional health points just doesn't do enough in my opinion. So I'm not a fan of this perk. Flute Force, I am actually a fan of. I definitely recommend that you put your points into this one. And what this does is allows you to place the Flautist even further away. So like if you are defending an objective, you can put him ever further away. It makes the survivors have to travel a further distance in order to get to him. And part of me wants to believe that the Flautist, the further the distance it is from an area that you're trying to defend, whether it's an area that you know that the map has spawned in and you're putting the flute down in order to enhance your units in that area before the survivors get there, something like that. The further away, I think it's a little bit quieter, a little less noticeable by survivors that there's a flute playing. Now you do have those auras, that kind of reddish hue that it gets applied to all your units from the Flautist, but it's just a little less obvious. Where is he? So huge fan of this. It's a 10% increase. I think the natural range is 50 meters, so this goes up to 55. Big fan of this. Now Necro's kind of unique in that this 5th level, although you think this is where like his strongest abilities would be at, the 5th level doesn't really have a lot of options to put all your points in, and you need to have 11 skill points to go from the 5th level with nothing applied to it up to the 6th. So where I recommend you put these 9 is, well, let me first say that you have quite a lot of flexibility in where you place these, but I'll show you where I've decided to place them. Now, 9 points going down a line, what I do is enhance the resurrection ability. Big fan. 40%, this is just a lot. And 30 seconds is a long time. It allows you to ping a lot of skeletons. This applies to basics and elites. You know that for a fact because of Come Back Stronger in the notes at the bottom. Shows that basics and elites both get resurrected. So if you just place down a ton of them at objective, throw in Evil Ash, and survivors are killing your units left and right, this brings them back and allows you to just ping as many of them as possible. If you're in that scenario where you just like have a whole army down and you summon an Evil Ash, probably the first thing you want to do is press 2, not 1. That way any units that are being focused at that moment while you're summoning, portaling in the boss, get brought back in that as soon as possible. The additional 5 seconds, I think, makes a difference. It allows you to carry on that effect for longer. So as units are fighting, they get brought in. Probably of these two, think this is the weaker of the abilities, really of all 4 of these, but still I quite like the duration bonus. Now you have 6 more points, and what I recommend is you go all the way back to the front and you just buff up first the health. I go health first. You get 10% for the second point, 15 for the third stack. Huge fan of these two. And then for the other 4, I go into balance bar. Now this is balance bar of all elites, all basic units, any that are portaled in, any that are just naturally in the environment, any that are brought in by traps. These just make them all stronger. And I want to believe that these bonuses stack with comeback stronger. So your units get ever stronger. If that's not true, I haven't done any testing to guarantee those health amounts or anything. But if it's not true, comeback stronger allows them to come back with more health, really, than what they would have came in with these health raisers. Now, with that allows you to get to the 6th level. But let me go ahead and spend a moment talking about these abilities here that I have not chosen. Now, I talked a little bit about elites and how I find that they're only useful in the objective areas, dagger, pages, and at the end. Elites are actually, I highly recommend them for taking on the book if you find yourself in a situation where you would rather focus the book instead of focusing survivors at the last in the last area. They're so strong, especially if you can get a Flautus on top of them. They're doing a lot of damage to the book. Spam basic, light attacks, heavy attacks, either way, you're doing a lot. So it's just because elites are only useful in those situations that I tend to lean toward just kind of putting things into Evil Ash when he's useful in all scenarios, or into the basics. Although basics really don't have a whole lot of abilities outside of a lot of war cries, so I guess you're not putting much of anything into abilities outside of Evil Ash. Now, improved Infernal Invigoration. Kind of the question that always run through my head is like, is this healing worth it? Is the last ability up here in the top right, Expanding Skeleton Support, worth it? And I find that it's just not. When you look at the perks that you have, the skill points I should say, that you have, it's like, what could you come out of in order to get down the line? And I find that Health Raiser is non-negotiable. Skeletal Resurrection, Infernal Refill, could be argued. Comeback Stronger, maybe a couple points down. Maybe you can sacrifice those 10%. Like you still get that additional 20% from just having the first skill point. So it's like you can kind of do that, but it's just these abilities again, just not very great. Just getting the additional 10%, not particularly great. Really, this becomes a rock star at the 3rd stack with that 40% additional healing, but just too situational. I do find myself using the grab quite a lot, especially like in hunters, leaders, anyone running away. But it's rarely thought of as like a way to get more health for Evil Ash. Once he goes down, he goes down. I'm not trying to like heal myself necessarily with his perk. I'm just trying to do as much damage as I can with the 3 ability. The Expanded Skeletal Support, I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not even exactly sure what the range is at base. It's impossible to tell. Just kind of looking at it in game, it does seem rather short. But like looking at this, it goes from 12 to 13, so it increases by 1 on the 2nd skill point, 2 on the 3rd. And it's just like, well, what is it on the 1st? Like, am I going from 8 meters to 12? That's a pretty big jump. But when I actually use it in the matches, I just felt like the points that I took out of in other areas felt like more of a detriment than the benefit and the range that I got from this. So I tend to stay in these especially, and then I end up with kind of like 1 extra point. I don't love the 2nd duration extender, so I tend to go to Infernal Refill and just make sure I have tons of orbs in those objective scenarios. Something else that's unique to Necro, and it is only Necro that gets this, he can summon in, portal in, 2 elites. Now, Warlord and Puppy, they only get 1. The basics, all of them, they get 1, 2. But the elites, they only get 1. But with Necro, you can drop in 2 elites, bam, bam, at a time. And so Infernal Refill, I think, actually does get a little bit extra usefulness out of Necro as opposed to the others, because you're spending quite a lot, or you have more opportunities to put in portals. Um, they do cost less, but even maxed out, all of it added together with these 10% bonuses, I think it's still around 400 points. So you still benefit from this additional refill. So I see more usefulness out of this than Test of Time. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking on how I enhance this back area. It's basically buffing Evil Ash's abilities, larger Flautus, and then just getting your health and balance bar up for everything, for elites, basics, and for the boss. Now, when you get to this area, what are the best abilities to go into? And when I thought about this, there's a couple of factors that play into this. One is you don't get a lot of damage upgrade. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking like from Puppy's perspective, and you're like, 10% is way more than the 2% that I get as Puppy. 5% for a second stack, 10% for a third. That's true. But for Necro, I just don't feel like those additional points here is giving you a lot. In retrospect of other abilities that you could be using. And so I'm a huge fan of these 10% buffs that you get here for damage, but slower to go into additional stacks. Although I think elites and basics can hit quite hard. I think the basics do 70 damage base, just off rip for light attacks, and elites do I think 90. So this jumps that up to almost 100. This jumps it to 77. You can get it to 84, but you're losing 2 additional skill points. And I just think that there are other areas that you see more benefit from. And I'll explain especially why I think Gates of Hell is the strongest abilities that you can go into for Necro. Now let's talk about the middle area first. Buff Bones. when you summon in those skeletal reinforcements, they come in with an additional health and damage increase on them, and I imagine that's in addition to any health raiser and rock steadies that you put on them. But when you think about it, what this really does is when you summon in skeletons, this 20% health damage increase that you get just kind of matches what portaling in skeletons does, and I just don't find it strong enough personally to make it worth using. I'm just not a huge fan of it, and it's a one-time, usually a one-off ability on Evil Ash. So I'm really hesitating to put anything into Buff Bones. If you want to go to Relentless Evil, some people are huge fans of just dropping the Flautus more often. I might recommend you put 1 point into this, but generally I wouldn't recommend this area. Speed Summoner, I'm also not a fan of, and the reason that Speed Summoner is kind of on the low priority for me is that when you press 1 and you bring in skeletons, yes, you're bringing in 3, and that's awesome, but it takes a really long time to come off cooldown, a very long time. It's 70 seconds at base, and the most you can reduce it by is 10%, which is just 7 seconds off of that. It's 63 seconds with both stacks into this. It's a very slow cooldown for any ability, really. And so you might not always have an Evil Ash that lasts that long, especially not often enough to make this a wanted ability. You might be able to pull this off on the second objective or the last, but I just don't think it's worth it. I'd rather just rely on summoning 1 time and that's it. And if they die quicker because I didn't put Buff Bones on, well, I gotta come back stronger, don't I? And so that 30-second duration, if they die in that short span, well, 30 seconds is quite a time. But if they die, then you know what? They come back and they get 40%. And I think this pings more often than, and you'll see much more usefulness out of come back stronger than something like Buff Bones, which is kind of like a similar equivalent. Relentless Evil. This is huge. This ability is huge on Puppeteer because of the way it works with where you're inside of a basic or elite and the cooldown's running during that time span. It's actually quite useful because you can kind of almost back to back Relentless Evil on them. I don't find it as useful here on Necro, and probably a big part of why I'm not a big fan of this is because of how many points it takes to get going. It goes from 5, 10 to 20%. It's just a very slow build up, and so it just doesn't get a lot of effectiveness until you get to that 20% reduction, that third stack, because that 5 and that 10 is not doing much. When you look at the cooldown, it's 75 seconds. So when you put 5% against this, it's not 75, it's 72. You put another 5%, it's not 75, it's 68 seconds. But it's still quite a long time. And if you go all 3 stacks, it gets down to 60 seconds flat. 75 times 80%, 60 seconds flat. Yes, there are situations where you'll be dropping in the flautist more often, and that will allow you to do it. I just find that when I have a successful flautist, I place it down. Survivors don't go down and chase it down. They don't immediately run away from it, and it's actually doing its job. I just don't find myself placing it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't find that when I'm ready to place a new one that I'm like staring at a timer and thinking like, man, like I gotta wait another 15 seconds. Like it's just, the scenarios don't really play out that way. I'm usually placing it, hoping they don't find it, maybe trapping it up, locking in a building somewhere with portals on the way to it, with traps on the way to it. You can kind of make him last in a lot of different unique ways, which is I'm sure there are videos out there that already exist that explain how to kind of make your flautist last longer. I would rely on those kind of strategies long before I would go into Relentless Evil. And the other reason I wouldn't put points in this section is that Gates of Hell is just so important on Necro. And you might be thinking like, why is Gates of Hell important on Necro? Like, you know, when you look at Warlord and Puppy, they have 40-second cooldowns on their basics and elites, and it's like, is it just because they're cheaper and the Portal Authority allows you to just like drop them in more often? Yes and no. Now, Necro has a huge drawback in their units. Now, they're naturally cheaper. It's not 150 for a basic, it's 125. With no Portal Authority, it's 125, so it's even cheaper when you have this going. But their base cooldown for basics and elites is not 40 seconds, it's 50 seconds. 50 seconds. It's a lot more. And it's a lot more. I remember Necro was my first demon that I started playing when I started this game, and there's just so many moments I used to complain all the time. And I didn't really understand why. Like there's these moments when I'm in objectives in the book scenario where I just like, I have energy, but I have no portals up. They're just still sitting on cooldown. I didn't really recognize that because I thought everyone had that 40-second cooldown, but I did some testing. It's actually 50 seconds at base. Now, when you increase the portal skills in game with your threat level, you can get another 20% cooldown off of your portals if they're maxed out. But guess what? That's only 20%, 10 seconds off. So with them maxed out in the game, the most you can get down is 40 seconds, which is where the other demons start at. And so they naturally get down to like 34 seconds, I want to say, or something. It feels like quite a bit more. I think it's actually 32 seconds. And you have Gates of Hell that you can put on them, and it reduces down to 30 seconds or all the way down to 26 seconds. These guys, the best you can hope for is to put Gates of Hell in, and that will allow you to be constantly summoning in, or at least get closer to constantly summoning in your basics and elites. Now, I personally recommend you go 2, 1, like that, and what this does, it takes another 5 seconds for 2 stacks, 5 seconds off of their cooldown. So at base, it's not 50 seconds, it's 45. And when you start to level it up, when you get to the second stack, it's another 5 seconds off. Third stack gets another 2.5, and fourth stack gets the 10 seconds off of it. So with 2 stacks into these Gates of Hells, you can get it down to 35 seconds. It's not on the same level as what the puppy and warlord get naturally. They naturally get down to 32. You kind of have to make up for the disadvantages of necro here. Now, so with these three here, that gets you 5 stacks in, allows you access into the level column 7 abilities. I would personally recommend you go damage first. Now, I'm a huge fan of these 10% damages. It's the most you can get out of any particular skill point, and I just think it's very useful. This increases the damage of his grab and his attacks, his heavy, lights. And then what I would recommend is you go into Gates of Hell boss. Now, this allows you to compensate for just the long duration that the boss units go through. I personally feel, I've heard people say things like it's too easy to head shoot Evil Ash, but I personally feel like the best thing you can do in this game for Necro, for really any boss, is get your boss unit out again as quickly as possible. So this 10% reduction gets you 18 seconds off. Each stack is 9 seconds off of that 180. And so that 18 seconds, it adds up. It gets it closer to 2.5 minutes rather than a full 3 minutes. Necro, like Warlord, has a 3-minute cooldown, and that cooldown does not start until after your boss unit dies or you F cancel out of it. The cooldown does not start when you summon it. You have to end the possession, and then the cooldown starts up. And the best thing you can do is get them out again. Whether you in that meantime enhance the boss's threat level and you get them a little bit stronger, but I think the best thing you could do is go Gates of Hell. If I could go further into cooldown reduction, I probably would on Necro. Um, but this is the most you can do. So after that, it gives you 1 point to put back. I just don't love putting 5% points into any particular unit. Although some people, like I'm quite a fan of boss, I still wouldn't do 15% damage. I wouldn't do it on basics or elites. I see so much usefulness in all three of them, but I just think the move is just to go 1 point into each of these. And so for me, it's Gates of Hell Elite. And this also gets 5 seconds off of their cooldown. So at the beginning, start 45 seconds. It's a long duration, but once you get them leveled up, especially the third stack, I highly recommend that kind of near the beginning of the games that you focus possession and basics, and then when you have the opportunity, I usually go possession basic, energy, basic possession, portals again, and then boss. And then kind of like as you're leveling up the boss with your threat levels, I'll level up the portals, the possession, and I just tend to focus boss the moment that you can skill it up. I do. And that's at threat level 10, 12, 14, 16 for level 4, and then level 20. Is when you can max out a boss, and that's when you no longer have a balance bar. Huge advantage. Kind of a side tip. This doesn't have to do with Necro in particular, but it's just like a big brain move you can do as any demon. Any demon is the possession 5th level skill point on possession also unlocks at 20, and you might look at that and think like, oh, I have a decision to make. Do I level up boss or do I level up possession? Well, what I tend to do, what I recommend you do, is when you get to level 19 on threat level, don't spend that skill point. Just don't. Just hold it. If you're doing like I recommend, which is getting possession maxed out as soon as you can, boss level maxed out as soon as you can at level 16, what you can do is you can hold your level 19 skill point, and when level 20 comes up, you can max out possession at level 5 and boss level 5, and boom, you got your boss coming in at the fastest cooldown he can, the strongest he can, no balance bar damage taken anymore, and the possession gives him 40% increased damage, 50% increased health. Those are huge increases. That is the power spike in this game for boss. Is well, for any unit, for demon in general, happens at getting boss level 5 and getting possession from level 3 to level 4 There's usually it does vary a little bit from each demon. Puppy goes from, just off the top of my head, I think it goes level 1 is 2% possession, damage, health, to 5 at level 2, to 10 at level 3, and then it jumps to 25 and jumps to 40 and 50 at the 5th level. Now, Necro is a little bit better. There's something about Puppy where they hold him down with possessions, but Necro, it's 5 at level 1, 10, 15, then it jumps by 10% from level 3 to 4, so 25% also, and then there's a huge power spike at the 5th level, the 5th threat level. So highly recommend that all demon players, no matter what demon you're playing, focus boss and focus possession when those opportunities come available to you. I don't think any portal is worth more than those possession build-ups, those boss build-ups. No boss is so weak that they're not worth putting points into. It's just not true. Now, what I find is that the mentality I have is some people like to go like all the way into basic portals. What I try to do is go 3 stacks into basic portals, 3 stacks into elites. So basics, I usually can get to the 3rd stack at level 9, and then I start focusing boss, a possession, a little bit of elite. So if I get to an objective and I have that my infernal refills kicking in, I can throw in basics and elites in the objective and start trying to defend that. But the thing is, at the 3rd stack of portals, it gets on basics or elites, it gets you 15% health increase, damage increase, but for the portaling in units, and it also gives you a 15% cooldown. There's a jump for elites. So when you first get them, 1 stack at elite, you have no cooldown reduction. It's 50 seconds. Then the next stack is only 5%, while basics is 10% at the 2nd stack, but it's only 5% for elites. But the 3rd stack gets you 15%. That's 3 stacks of this. And so that's a huge jump. The 4th stack will get you the full 20%, and the 5th one just makes them stronger. Very useful. But yeah, like that 3rd stack gets you to 25% cooldown in addition to these and then I would focus boss all the way. Focus boss and possession. And that's how you're going to be ending games, is through the boss and through possession. Mostly possession, but boss is just so useful, so strong, huge power spikes. You get the comeback stronger happening. You can grab hunters that are trying to run away and just wail on supports, and they can't be healing with Evil Ash. So that's kind of it. That's why you might not have been seeing a lot of demon players go into Gates of Hell, but why I think it's so useful on Necro in particular, because I would not recommend this on the other demons. This is overcoming a weakness in Necro in particular. All right, well, thank you for listening for my thoughts and discussion on my Necro build. Let me know if you have any thoughts of your own, if you have any ideas, if you know anything about the range on skeletal support. There are some things I'm still learning, but just appreciate you listening to my thoughts and how I came to the best build for Necro. All right, thank you. Bye.